Now, WWE has the draft coming up this week. It starts on Friday. It ends next Monday. We don't yet know which talent are eligible on which day. They have the talent pools, so some will be eligible on Friday, and everybody else will be eligible on Monday. Honestly, they probably don't even know that yet either. And none of the talent have been informed about who's going where, which is standard practice for the draft. I mean, that's the way it always is in WWE. And you can understand how that makes the talent feel. Because the one area where the draft does matter, if you are a talent and you are being moved, if you are part of a team, if you are part of a group, if you have people you travel with, if you have friends, you could be separated from those people. So you can understand the wrestlers being anxious and wanting some kind of heads up. But I also understand the company not wanting to tell everybody where they're going, because what's going to end up happening is people are going to leak shit, right? And they don't want stuff to get out. So I get it. But they usually do the draft in rounds as well. I'm not doing this in rounds, but I thought I would do a little mock draft of my own just to shake up the rosters. Now, this does not reflect everybody on the roster, but I think I've covered all the key names, including some people that have been out on the injured list. Bobby Roode is not included because he is going to be out for a long time yet. And I'm not sure what his future on the main roster looks like, sadly. Coming back from spinal fusion surgery when he's going to be 47 years old. Yeah, there's a lot of question marks about his future. Triple H, though, is the one who brought him into NXT. He is the one who pushed him as an NXT champion. So if he is able to come back, I think Triple H would find a way to use him. But again, I'm not including him in any of this because he's not going to be back for a long time. And even like Big E and stuff, if Big E was to be able to come back at some point, he'll land wherever the New Day is. So anyway, with that all that out of the way, let me go through SmackDown first. The number one pick in this draft is the same as what the number one pick in the last draft was 2 years ago, I believe, which was Roman Reigns. Roman Reigns is the biggest star in the company. Roman Reigns is the biggest star in the business right now. And he is the champion. He is the man. He is going to be the number one pick, and he's going to stay on SmackDown. And I believe that the bloodline should stay together for now. The bloodline will stay together. So where Roman goes, so go the Usos and Paul Heyman and Solo Sikoa. So Roman will be the number one pick. I would have him as the number one pick staying on SmackDown. There's been no mention of splitting any of the titles in the draft. There's been no even rumors and reports leaking that they plan to do so. I would not split the top titles in the draft. I would not split the top titles until Roman Reigns loses. And then they could separate them again right after if they want to. Or you have a full-time champion, let's say it's Cody Rhodes. You have a full-time champion who floats. The problem with Roman having both belts for so long, he is never on Raw. He does not work Mondays. If they had somebody who actually appeared more frequently on both shows, they can make it work. But my guess is they end up splitting the belts once his run comes to an end. The tag team division overall is not deep enough for there to be two sets of tag team titles. So I'm fine with creating one new pair, have new belts made, one new pair of tag team belts, call them the WWE Tag Team Championships, and having them float between shows just like they do with the women's tag team belts. And they don't even have a division for those belts. It's whoever they decide to stick together at any given moment when they need a new challenger. Rhea Ripley is the SmackDown Women's Champion. She should be remaining on SmackDown as the SmackDown Women's Champion and taking the Judgment Day with her. I would shift the entire Judgment Day. I would not break them up. I've talked about maybe Dominic, the LWO turning on Rey Mysterio, and Dominic can be with the LWO. You could still do that at some point, but right now the Judgment Day, they have a good thing going. I don't see a need to split them up just yet. So Rhea and the Judgment Day to SmackDown. Edge, we don't know how many more matches he's got left. We don't know when his next match is going to be. Maybe it'll be Saudi Arabia next month. We don't know. We haven't seen him since WrestleMania. He beat Finn Balor at WrestleMania. We haven't seen Edge. Balor, though, has been on television every week. But Edge, I think, could use a little change of scenery. I would have Edge to SmackDown. I would have SmackDown keep Drew McIntyre. I don't know what his future is going to be either. You haven't seen him on television since WrestleMania, but he should be back in the next few weeks. I would keep Drew on SmackDown. We have Bray Wyatt. I don't know what the hell's going on with Bray. Supposedly it's some sort of illness, whatever the hell that means. It's not an injury, it's an illness, it's who knows. When and if Bray Wyatt is able to come back, he should be on the SmackDown brand. Randy Orton is another one. He's been out injured for almost a year. Pretty serious shit. Some talk about whether or not he'll even be able to make it back to the ring. I don't get the sense he's imminently coming back, but I do expect him to be back in the ring. When he is ready to return, I would have Randy Orton on SmackDown. And as far as a possible program with Cody, I'll talk about Cody in a little bit. Even if they're not on the same brand, there'll always be a draft next year. So even if you don't do Orton and Cody in 2023, there's always Orton and Cody in 2024. But I would have Randy Orton on SmackDown. I would have Matt Riddle on SmackDown as well. And if you want to have a proper ending to RK Bro, you could reunite them when Orton comes back and do a turn at some point. You keep your options open by having them both on the same show. I would have Matt Riddle on SmackDown as well. Rey Mysterio should be drafted to SmackDown, keeping him on that show. And the LWO with Zelina Vega. I would keep all of them on the blue brand. Logan Paul is another one. He's not a full-time guy, but he did just re-sign with the company, so he's going to be sticking around for a few years. You put him on SmackDown. So he could work with people like Edge and Drew McIntyre or Matt Riddle. These are all names he has not worked with before. So Logan Paul is on SmackDown. Austin Theory is the United States champion. I would do a swap. I would swap the two mid-card men's titles. And I would send Austin Theory and the United States Championship to SmackDown. Shinsuke Nakamura, Karrion Kross, The Miz, all would be on SmackDown in my draft. Johnny Gargano, who's out right now with a shoulder issue. When he comes back, I would have him on SmackDown. I would have Tommaso Ciampa on SmackDown as well. Again, he's another one kind of like Rude, where he's been out for a while and there's been no talk about him coming back imminently, but I would imagine he'll be back sooner than later. He's been out for a while. And I would have Ciampa and Gargano on the same brand because I think the best thing for both of them would be to reunite DIY. Not only the best thing for the two of them, but the best thing for the tag team division would be for DIY to have a run on the main roster. So where Gargano goes, Ciampa, when he's ready to come back, should go as well. Asuka, who has not been seen since WrestleMania. I don't know if she's back in Japan for a while, when she'll be back. Asuka should be shifted over to SmackDown. Bayley. There should be no more Damage Control. Damage Control is done. And Bayley is going to go off on her own. I would draft her over to SmackDown. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, they stay on SmackDown. They're the reigning women's tag team champions, so as long as they're the champs, they float anyway. Candice LeRae, where Johnny goes, Candice will go. So Candice LeRae will be in the women's division on SmackDown. Braun Strowman and Ricochet, I would keep them on SmackDown. Alpha Academy, Chad Gable and Otis. I would love to see Chad Gable get a bit of a singles mid-card push. You could still do that, but you could also keep the Alpha Academy together for now. I like Gable and Otis together still for the time being, so I would move them over to SmackDown. And the other person I would move to SmackDown is Angelo Dawkins. Notice I said Angelo Dawkins. I did not say Montez Ford. I would split the Street Profits. I would have Montez Ford on Mondays, and I would have Angelo Dawkins on Fridays. And maybe that's not going to end up being such a good thing for Angelo Dawkins, but I do think the time is now to begin the singles push for Montez Ford. You could always do that without splitting the team up and just having him do more singles. That's true. I don't know, what's left for the Street Profits to do. I feel like they've been tag team champions before, right? They've been together for a while now. They've wrestled all the other teams there are to wrestle. I see more potential in Montez as a single than anything else. And it'll take a while to really build him up, I think, to a top level. Now is the time to begin. I said, 2023 feels like a breakout year for him. It was in the Elimination Chamber match. I think it could be in the Money in the Bank match as well. He wouldn't win it, but I think he could be in that match and he can have a breakout performance. But Angelo Dawkins, I would send him to SmackDown. Let me shift over to Monday Night Raw. The number one pick for Monday Night Raw, Cody Rhodes. He will be the face of the Monday Night Raw brand in my draft. Brock Lesnar is the one he's feuding with right now. Brock Lesnar, I don't remember what his status was for the last draft. I think he was a free agent who could pretty much go wherever he wants to go. So I would just work it the same way. Brock can pretty much, he's just one of those guys. He'll go where he wants to go. It's like John Cena in the last draft, right? What do they call unrestricted free agent? If he was to be drafted anywhere, I would have Brock on Raw. But again, Brock's going to go where Brock wants to go. But Cody would be the number one pick for Monday Night Raw. Bianca Belair is the Raw Women's Champion. She would stay put where she is. None of this belt swap shit. You give me the red belt, you give me the blue belt. No. Rhea stays on SmackDown. Bianca stays on Raw. Charlotte Flair should be drafted to Monday Night Raw. Charlotte apparently is taking a little vacation with Andrade. She's going to be gone for a while. She'll be traveling the world. When she's ready to come back, they can begin to build to Charlotte Flair against Bianca Belair. So she'll have somebody to work with when she gets back. Seth Rollins. I was toying with the idea of moving Rollins and Becky over to Fridays until I decided that I wanted to swap the two mid-card titles. So what I've decided is I would keep Seth Rollins on Monday Night Raw, which could really use him anyway. I mean, Roman Reigns, SmackDown is the Roman Reigns show, and I think it will stay the Roman Reigns show. Rollins is one of the top baby faces in the company right after Cody. I think Raw could use him more than SmackDown could. It's pretty clear to me they have no plans of doing Rollins and Reigns again anytime soon. So I would have Rollins right where he is on Monday Night Raw, but I would change the roster around him. Because if anybody needs new people to work with, it is Seth Rollins. That's one of the reasons why I was going to move him. Instead of moving him, I'm moving other people. So he'll have new people to work with. Rollins is on Raw, so is Becky Lynch. I would keep her where she is. Trish Stratus, it's kind of like the Brock thing. She's not full-time. She's really only in for the feud now with Becky, and then she'll be gone. So does she really need to be drafted? No, she doesn't. If she's going to be drafted anywhere, though, it would be Monday Night Raw. Kevin Owens would be on Raw. Sami Zayn would be drafted to Monday Night Raw. I would move the entire Imperium faction from Fridays to Mondays, including Gunther, including the Intercontinental title. We're going to swap the US and the IC belts. Theory and the US title go to SmackDown. Gunther brings the Intercontinental Championship over to Raw. And by the way, if you have Gunther on Raw and Brock Lesnar is on Raw, you keep open the possibility that maybe at some point later this year or early next year, we could build to a Brock and a Gunther match because they are on the same brand. But I would move Gunther over to Monday nights. Alexa Bliss, we haven't seen much of her. I don't know what's going on with her. I would keep her on Raw in the women's division there. The New Day, I would move them over from SmackDown to Raw. If Big E ever does come back, he could slide right in there with them on Monday nights. AJ Styles has been out with a broken ankle. He missed WrestleMania. We haven't heard too much about him. He should be ready to come back soon. I would keep AJ Styles on Raw, keep the OC together, right? The Good Brothers, Mia Yim, Bobby Lashley, and Bronson Reed both. I would keep them on Raw. Sheamus. I would draft Sheamus from SmackDown to Monday Night Raw with the Brawling Brutes, but I think it's time for Pete Dunne to get a push of his own solo, apart from the Brawling Brutes. Even if I would move them all to the same brand, I would like to see Butch revert back to Pete Dunne and have Pete Dunne get a push because, hey, you got Gunther and Pete Dunne, among others, on the same roster. If you give Pete Dunne a proper push, that would be a hell of an Intercontinental title program at some point. But where Gunther goes, Sheamus should follow. LA Knight. We need something for LA Knight. And it's not happening on SmackDown. So there's a better chance. His chances are much better being away from the Roman Reigns show and being moved over to Monday Night Raw. I would move LA Knight to Monday nights. Ronda Rousey and Shayna Baszler, I would draft them to Monday Night Raw. The Viking Raiders can go to Monday Night Raw. I mentioned Montez Ford, split up the Street Profits. Montez is going to stay where Bianca is. He's going to stay on Mondays. Could eventually be built up as a challenger for the Intercontinental title. Io Sky and Dakota Kai both. I would keep them on Raw. Again, Damage Control is over as far as the grouping with Bayley. Bayley would be on Fridays. You could keep Io and Dakota together as a team because God knows that women's division could use more tag teams, not less. But pushing Io as a single, as a babyface single star, I think is the way to go. But Io and Dakota both would be on Monday Night Raw. And for Seth Rollins, again, with Rollins being on Mondays, you move over Gunther, you move over LA Knight. Those are two new opponents for him to work with. He can work with Gunther for the Intercontinental title. He can work with LA Knight. I think that would be a great program for both those guys. Now we look at the NXT call-ups, because NXT is going to be included in this draft. To what extent? How many NXT call-ups will there be? Are they only going to do 3 or 4? Are they going to do 10? I don't see them going crazy and doing that many. These are the people I would be calling up from NXT. We start with the obvious one. And I'm not so sure they're going to do it right now. But if it were me, I would. And that's Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker lost the NXT Championship at Stand and Deliver. And he just turned heel. And I think it was the best thing that could have happened to him. I like the idea of calling him up to the main roster as a heel instead of as a babyface. Now he's working a match at fucking Spring Breakin' this week against Andre Chase, in the mid-card. So what they're doing is they're really establishing him as a heel. And so far, so good. I mean, it's only been a few weeks, but so far, so good. That's why I'm not sure if they're ready to move him just yet. They may want to give him some more seasoning down there as a heel. I think he's ready, though. I would move Braun Breaker to the main roster. I would put him on SmackDown. Grayson Waller is another one. He's challenging for the NXT Championship this Tuesday. He's not going to win. And then he's going to move to the main roster. He should be. Because I don't know what else is left for him to do. Grayson Waller, I would put him on Monday Night Raw. Whatever brand The Miz is on, he should be on the opposite brand. There's too many similarities between the two of them, right down to the talk show, where they don't need to be on the same show. If Raw is losing Miz, they're gaining... in a way, they're gaining a new Miz by getting Grayson. Although Grayson Waller is a better in-ring worker than The Miz is. I would have Grayson Waller on Monday Night Raw. Roxanne Perez, former NXT, I should say, women's champion. I would be moving her up to SmackDown. She is very young, but she's very good for someone who, again, I think is only 21 years old. I would have her on SmackDown. Pretty deadly. I mean, they're a gimme, I think. Get a new team up on the main roster. I would have them on Monday Night Raw. Speaking of tag teams, Katana Chance, Caden Carter, they've been toiling away in developmental now for years. I think they've been a team. For close to 5 years at this point. They are a legitimate tag team. And if the women's tag team titles are going to still be a thing, these two women need to be called up to the main roster. I would put them on SmackDown. Cameron Grimes has been stuck in purgatory now for months. He hasn't been on NXT, but he still hasn't been called up to the main roster. It's more than time for him to have a chance to get the call up, and I would put him on SmackDown. Tyler Bate, there's been talk about maybe he might get a call up. He should, and I would put him on Monday Night Raw. Wherever the Imperium faction goes, where Gunther is going, that's where Tyler Bate should go. And if Ilya Dragunov was going to be called up, and I would not call him up just yet, but if he was going to be called up, I'd put him on Raw too. But I would send Tyler Bate to Raw. And then there's Zoe Stark. I would send Zoe Stark to the women's division on Monday Night Raw. Zoe Stark reminds me of someone like Victoria, in that I don't think she'll ever be pushed as the head of the division or anything, but I could see her holding the women's championship a couple of times and being the person that a lot of the ladies on the roster have their best match with. So she goes to Raw. I would draft Hit Row back down to NXT. Because frankly, they probably never should have left NXT in the first place. So I would take Hit Row, move them back down to Tuesdays. So it looks like Raw, if you look at the moves here that I've made, it looks like Raw is getting more talent than SmackDown. And coming out of this stronger. There's a reason for that. Raw is the longer show. Raw is a slog to sit through. It is 3 hours long. Therefore, Raw should be getting more talent than SmackDown. And God knows they could use more new faces because the show is about as boring as it was before under Vince McMahon on most weeks. There was a honeymoon period right after Triple H took the book where he made some improvements. A lot of, the constant rematches stopped. We got longer matches. There was a renewed focus on the mid-card titles, especially the Intercontinental title, and that's all a plus. But there is one area in particular where Triple H has dropped the ball. And I know that with Vince McMahon feeling more free to start popping up backstage at some of these shows and calling in rewrites, and it's very easy to say, oh, Vince McMahon, he's unofficially back in WWE Creative, and whenever something bad happens, we can just blame him for it. He makes for a very easy scapegoat. I get it. I do it, too, because there are times where it's very obvious that something was a Vince McMahon influenced decision. Triple H has said he takes suggestions from his father-in-law. They talk about creative. Sometimes it's very clear when those situations are, so it's very easy to just blame Vince for everything and give Triple H a pass. The truth is, the booking of the women's division in WWE has been worse since Triple H took over as the head of creative. Or at a minimum, it has not gotten any better. And I will explain why in the next clip.